להרות בבל, שם ישבנו גם בכינו, וזוכרנו את ציון, את ציון.
This past week was Tisha B'Av, and I personally had a very powerful, meaningful Tisha B'Av because I spent all of Tisha B'Av reading an incredible book. It's the epic autobiography of a survivor of the Holocaust named Chaim Shapiro called Go My Son. It's his story of how during the war his parents sent him, they said, "Go my son," they sent him away from their hometown in Poland, and he ended up seeking refuge in the Soviet Union. So basically, by doing this, Chaim Shapiro ended up being, from his whole, big city with a large Jewish population, he was one of only 2 survivors. So, but his whole story is about going around the Soviet Union, during the war years and trying to survive and going from collective farm to collective farm. And the story that he tells, I think was very, very powerful for me to be reading it on Tisha B'Av when I was so hungry and so thirsty and feeling so weak and also feeling so sweaty and hot and wishing that I could take a shower to feel better. And that realizing, reading about this person, Chaim Shapiro, and about this society, during the war years, that, for them, the way that I felt was the norm. That was how they felt all the time. They were always hungry and always thirsty in many parts of the Soviet Union where there's a lack of water. And Chaim Shapiro writes that, he only had one outfit, and he would wear that one outfit for months and months and months, of hard labor until basically it would be worn down to shreds. And it was very, very striking for me. Here I am, usually having, abundant amounts of, changes of clothing and 50 different headscarves and an abundant amount of, food and water and being able to take, a shower whenever I want to. And it's very, very striking for me, the abundance that I have, but that I really, really don't appreciate, that I take for granted. And even more powerful thing that I was feeling when I was reading the book was that he wrote about how the family unit, the normative family unit of husband, wife, children living under the same roof, during the war years, it basically had ceased to exist. Chaim Shapiro himself, during the 6 years that he was, fleeing and then fighting the Nazis in the Polish army, so he had no way of being in contact with his family, and he was extremely, extremely close with his parents and with his 2 brothers. But he had no way, there was no way of contacting them by letter or by telegram or by, now phone, email. Now my family lives in America, but I'm in touch with them all the time. But he had no way for all those years, and he didn't know that, tragically all of his family had been murdered by the Nazis. He didn't know that until after the war had ended. But also, in his travels around the Soviet Union, there were no men around. All the men, especially towards the end of the war, all the men between the ages of 15 and 65 had been sent to the front. And women were living, for years and years and years without their husbands, not knowing if their husbands had been killed at the front because the army often didn't notify them. And so also there were no babies, there were no young children because the husbands had been away for so long. Just basically this time when there was just the normal family unit had just dissolved. It just didn't exist. And once again reading that, I just had this feeling how much I take just the existence of the fact that I live in a regular normative family unit, the fact that how I take that for granted, the fact that my husband comes, my husband lives in the same house as me, the fact that that my children live in the same house as me, that we live together as a family, and it made me feel bad, that I think that oftentimes I focus more on the inconvenience of the family, on the having to do housework and, having to change this one's diaper and get this one lunch and, this one's crying and these ones are fighting and, I focus more on the inconvenience of it rather than the incredible privilege of it, I think that what really, really the feeling that I was left with after this Tisha B'Av was just a sense of the incredible abundance of my life and of our lives, the incredible abundance that I tend to take for granted, Something that I realized, when I was reading it, is I realized that on a material level, and also like on just the being with my family level, I have infinitely more than Chaim Shapiro, than the man who was reading the man who wrote this incredible autobiography. But the one thing that he has much more in abundance than me, with all of my infinite, headscarves and changes of clothing and food and water and having my wonderful family all around me all the time. What he has that I don't have is gratitude. He writes about, he's traveling on the Trans-Siberia Railroad to, the Far East, working in a collective farm, and he sees the sunset and he says, thank you, God, that I'm able to see this amazing sunset. And then he's working on a collective farm, and he works as a shepherd, and he's out in a clearing in the forest. He says, thank you, God, that I'm able to be here in the forest and talk to you. And again in the book, through this story of incredible suffering and incredible, worry about his family, at the same time, like, it's sprinkled with incredible amounts, just for the simple things of incredible amounts of gratitude for what he does have. So I want to bless all of us. Yesterday, my older daughters, Hadass and Hallel, they traveled for the first time as unaccompanied minors to visit their grandparents in Baltimore, my parents. What was really so that was a pretty emotional parting for me. But also, what was very moving was that their younger sister, so my Hadass and Hallel are 11 and 9, and the third sister is Mayan, and she's 7 years old. And we decided she is just too young to travel on her own overseas. So Mayan, when her sisters left, I think that she hadn't realized how sad she would be, and she cried. I think she sobbed for close to 2 hours. She was so upset that her sisters were going, and it was very beautiful, I think, for me to see. Mayan said, she said, Ima, she said, it's not like when a friend goes on a trip. She said, these are my sisters. These are my sisters, and they're going away. And the truth is, if you saw my girls like on a regular day, you'd probably see just as much fighting and bickering as you would sort of peaceful, wonderful, idyllic playing. But it was very striking just how deeply Mayan appreciates her sisters, and how deeply she feels that now they're gone for a little bit from her. And I want to bless all of us, that we should feel, that it shouldn't take for our family members to go away for us to appreciate having them near us, and that we should appreciate, that everything that we have. It's not, we tend to feel like everything is coming to us. Like, well, of course I have, of course I have this husband, of course I have this children, of course I have this food and these 50 headscarves and this water that I have to drink, but that if we could appreciate everything that we have, that it's a free gift. It's an undeserved gift that God has given us. So I want to bless all of us that we should so appreciate that it shouldn't take our family members going away or a lack for us to appreciate all the infinite amounts of undeserved gifts that we have. I want to bless everyone with an amazing week.
על ראש שמחתי